All right, now we're going to move on to the last video of section 8.3. All right, in this video, we're going to use our trigonometric ratios to solve for the angle measures. All right, so we're going to use the same trigonometric ratios that we were doing before, our SOHCAHTOA, but now we're going to use it to solve for an angle measure. So if you're given this triangle, and I ask you to solve for what is the measure of angle B, you might be able to look at this and say, well, I have two legs of my right triangle, and one of the legs is the other leg times the square root of 3, and my hypotenuse is my leg times 2. So you might be able to identify that this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And you can say, well, that means that since 4s are smaller, the two legs, that means B has to be 30 degrees, and that A would have to be 60 degrees. So you could solve this particular triangle using that. However, not every triangle we do is going to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So what we can use then is what's called our inverse, or sine, or cosine, or tangent inverse. So the inverse to sine is sine inverse. The inverse to tangent is our tangent inverse. And our inverse to cosine is our cosine inverse. So this will allow for us, these will allow for us to solve for the angle measures of a triangle. So if we were to solve this using our trigonometric ratios, we would highlight angle B because that's the angle I asked you to solve for. And you can then say, well, I could use this one here because this would then be opposite, this would be adjacent, and this would be our hypotenuse. And you can say, well, since our adjacent is 4 root 3, I'm not going to use that one. So of my SOHCAHTOA, I'm not going to use my adjacent because it's just a little bit harder of a number to work with. So that means it eliminates our cosine and our tangent. So you could then say sine of B is equal to our opposite, 4, over our hypotenuse, 8. And you could say sine of B is equal to 1/2. And then if you want to solve for this angle, because remember, this B represents an angle. If you want to solve for that, you would take the sine inverse of both sides. And this will here eliminate our sine, and we would isolate that angle B. And then sine inverse of 1/2 is equal to 30. So that means our angle B is equal to 30 degrees. So you can use your calculator to solve for these. All right, so we're going to do a couple problems on this, and then that's it for this section. All right, so here we want to find what is the measure of angle X to the nearest degree. So we highlight our angle X and we fill in our sides. This is our opposite, this is our adjacent, and this is our hypotenuse. So we have our SOHCAHTOA. Since we don't know our adjacent at all, I will not use cosine and I will not use tangent because they include our adjacent. So that means we are going to use our sine. So then it's sine of angle X is equal to our opposite over our hypotenuse. So sine of angle X is equal to 6 over 10. So we know that this will then reduce to sine of X is equal to 3 over 5. And now if I want to solve for this, since I want to isolate the angle here, I need to get rid of the sine that's being done to it right now, and I need to take the sine inverse. So if I take the sine inverse of here, remember our inverse operations will undo each other, so that means they will cancel each other out, and I'm left with just X. But what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I need to take the sine inverse of 3 over 5. Now the sine inverse button, the sine to -1 power, although it's not read like that, it's read our sine inverse, it will be above your sine button on your calculator. And you will press shift, and then you'll press a sine button so you can get the sine inverse, and then you just type 3 divided by 5. Now, in some calculators, you will have to put it around in parentheses when you're doing this. Some calculators, you don't need to do that, and you can do 3 over 5, so all this depends on your calculator. But you should, most likely, you're going to have to put it in parentheses so your calculator knows you're taking the sine inverse of 3/5. And then when you press enter, it'll give you your answer. So in this case, our X is equal to 38.87 degrees, but it says to the nearest degree, so then we will round this up. That X is approximately 39 degrees. And then I can quickly solve for H if I really wanted to, because I know that the triangles will add to 180, and then we can go ahead and solve for BX. So we can now solve for all the missing parts of this triangle. All right, there's one more example that we're going to do, and then we're finished. Same thing, what is the measure of angle x to the nearest degree? So then we will go ahead and fill in opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. We have our SOHCAHTOA. We don't know what our opposite is, so that means we will not use our sine or our tangent, and we will only use our cosine. So then it's cosine of angle x is equal to our adjacent over our hypotenuse. Our cosine of angle x is equal to 15 over 20. Our cosine of angle x is equal to 4 over 5. I'm sorry, 3 over 4. And now if we want to solve for this angle x, we need to do the inverse operation of cosine. So we will take our cosine inverse of each side, and we will then be able to undo this and isolate our variable x. Now remember, the cosine inverse button will be above the cosine button on your calculator. So you'll press Shift Cosine, and then you'll type in 3/4. Remember, you should put this in parentheses just to make sure. Not all calculators make you do it, but just to make sure, you should put it in parentheses. And that means x is approximately equal to 41.41 degrees. But it asks for the nearest degree, so you can say x is approximately 41 degrees. All right, that's it for this video. That's it for this section.